Am I willing to contemplate allowing myself to feel the truth of the powerlessness that is part of being human?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is yes, then it becomes easier to get out of the guilt.
Yes.
Because then it doesn't have to be anybody's fault.
Right.
The truth is just things happen.
You're listening to the Nacho Kids podcast, where we discuss all things step family related. Real stories, real people, real help. Your hosts are the creators of the Nacho Kids Method and the Nacho Kids Academy Step Family Coaching Team, Lori and David Sims.
Welcome to episode 264 of the Nacho Kids podcast.
Well.
Well.
So we are full swing summertime.
We are full swing summertime. Swing summertime.
Okay.
Well, I want to share something. I'm making progress on my book.
Are you?
Yeah, like I have a plan.
It's going to be a thing, and it's going to be like rectangle, and it's going to have pages in it.
Well, I think I finally figured out some things I've been struggling with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I know there's a lot of people that would love to see this book come out.
Yes. Now I just got to get over my fear of being on camera and video.
What's that got to do with a book?
Because I have to promote it.
Oh, you have to be on tour. You're going to be
No,
on a book tour.
I don't need to be on tour.
The
No, that's
Nacho
crazy.
Kids World Book Tour.
No, because I need to do like Instagram videos and reels or whatever they're called. And
Yeah, you do.
all right, so
Yeah. So, yeah, the book that's been 20 years in the making.
all right, what else we got going on?
Let's see. You and I will be going up to Boston pretty soon.
For a couple of days.
Yep. We're going out west. Not sure if it's Colorado or Arizona or maybe both, but we do want to potentially see whether or not we can do maybe like a meet and greet for those of you who are listeners and, want to meet up somewhere. So I guess
It was Scottsdale, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado.
yeah. So if you're in those areas and you would be interested, then shoot us an email. Let us know. Contact us at nachokids.com. Let us know, and if we put something together, we'll let you know.
And I'm thinking of just a Hickory Tavern or something.
Right.
A
Yeah,
room at a restaurant. Which, if there is interest, I'm going to need somebody to help me find that place.
Yeah, if you're interested and you want to help out, let us know. Yeah, so, nothing crazy, but, something that'll hold maybe 20 people or so. If you just want to meet up and all this kind
Eat
of stuff.
nachos.
Yeah, there you go.
That's all we're going to eat is nachos.
Speak for yourself.
All right. Our guest today is Krista St-Germain.
Oh, I want a name with Saint in it.
I know.
Yeah,
It's like Claudette Chenever's name. It's Claudette Chenever.
yeah.
And it's Krista St-Germain.
Yeah, I want to be David St. Sims.
No.
You're like, you're no saint.
No, not at all. I do want to add a warning about this podcast. Krista experienced her husband dying from a drunk driving accident. Krista is the host of the Widowed Mom podcast.
Okay.
She's a stepmom.
Oh,
And she was a stepkid.
okay.
So she talks about grief and blended families, myths about the grief stages. And she told me something I found very interesting.
What's that?
Did you know that the 5 stages of grief were created in 1969?
No, I didn't know that.
They were created for terminally ill patients.
Huh. So if you're going through 5 stages of grief, you were terminally ill. That's who they presented that to initially.
Like hospice. Yes.
Okay. Wow. So it wasn't for the survivors. It was for those who would not survive.
Yep.
Wow. No, I did not know that.
That's what she told me.
Interesting.
The hardest part of blending for her is supporting her partner when she has different views on parenting his kids. Surprise!
That is a challenge.
And navigating the opinions he has about her raising her kids.
Yeah.
Her best advice is respect previous relationships.
Yeah. Which would include the parent-child relationship.
Yep. Exactly. That's what it is in relation to. All right. That's all I'm going to tell you.
All right, then. Well, let's get to listening.
Today we have Krista St-Germain. Hey, Krista, how are you?
Hey, I am happy to be here.
Happy to have you.
Thank you.
So you grew up in a blended family.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It reads a little like a Jerry Springer episode, and I'm dating myself with that reference, but I don't really recall a time when my biological parents were married. They got divorced when I was so little that I don't remember any of it. And so some of my first memories actually are with a blended family. So my mom and dad married shortly after high school, kind of high school sweethearts, had me, got divorced. And then a couple of years after that, another couple happened to be my mom's best friend growing up. She had gotten married. They had had a child and they got divorced. And when I was 5-ish, my mom married her best friend's ex-husband. Oh, it gets better.
Okay.
The look on your face was priceless. And then a couple of years after that, her best friend married my dad.
What?
So I know, right? So my stepbrother and I both share parents. So my parents are his step-parents are my parents. And so I grew up with a very blended family in that everyone had like shared custody. So they always kept my brother and I together. We're 9 months apart, stepbrother, but they kept us together. We would spend 1 week at one house. And then on Sunday, there would be a family meeting. They would discuss what happened during the week. And we would trade houses. And we did that every week until we were old enough to drive and decide where we wanted to spend our time.
Wow. Okay. So your mom married her best friend's ex-husband. Your dad married your mom's best friend's...
My mom's best friend.
Right. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
And so something else you said kind of shocked me almost as much as that was that y'all had family meetings on Sundays.
Well, the parents did. My brother and I weren't really involved. You know, they would just kind of send us to go do whatever. But yeah, they had family meetings. The four of them would sit down and discuss what had happened. Were there behavioral issues? Were there things that needed to be dealt with? They would occasionally, maybe not weekly, kind of settle up on finances so that things were very evenly split. Mm-hmm.
Wow. It sounds like they had a really good co-parenting relationship between everybody.
They worked it out. I don't think it was easy for them, to be honest. 3 of them had come from families that were, the parents stayed married until they died. Mm-hmm. But my stepmother did not. And she had a very unpleasant experience with her parents getting divorced when she was young. And because her experience was so awful, her commitment level to making sure that my brother and I did not have that experience was really high, right? She just carried the torch. And when things were rough, she was the one pulling them together, making sure they worked it out, smoothed it over. There was a lot of bitterness in the early days, but because of her and because of the way that they managed to work together, my brother and I we didn't really ever see it. We heard about it now that we're adults, but we didn't see it.
That's awesome, though.
Yeah,
it
and
really
now they're
is.
kind of like siblings. They're all they treat each other like siblings. Like they very much care and respect the others, but also sometimes they make each other crazy. But yeah,
exactly like siblings.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, did your mom and dad splitting up have anything to do with them being attracted to these other people, or they just didn't get along well?
No, I think they kind of just outgrew each other, to be honest. Mm-hmm. They were the only people that they had each ever dated. And I just think they outgrew each other. And so now, again, who knows? Like, do I really know what happened behind closed doors? Probably not.
No.
But from what I've been told and from the amount of time that passed from their divorces to their remarrying and getting together, the math would indicate that it really had nothing to do with the others.
So what was your relationship like with your stepmom and your stepdad? Was it a similar relationship between the two?
In some ways, my stepdad was very much a kind of stay in your own lane stepdad, which is, I think, probably where I picked up my own philosophy about blended families, in that he never really tried to parent me in terms of discipline or, conflict resolution, those kinds of things. He left that to my mom. Now, I think, honestly, I was a pretty easy kid. My brother was the more challenging one. But he was very encouraging to me, very loving to me. He was a good conversationalist. He definitely expanded the way that I thought about things. And he was somebody I could go to and talk to. My stepmom was a little bit more assertive. She would push me more. I was a very shy kid and kind of clingy to my dad. Mm-hmm. And she could tell, I think, that maybe wasn't the healthiest thing and that I needed a little more independence and assertiveness. And she worked really hard to try to instill within me a voice, right? To let me express, I guess, maybe the voice that was already there because I was kind of mousy and quiet.
Oh.
So that wasn't always comfortable though, right? I look back and I really appreciate it now. But, when you're being pushed to the edge of your, that growth, I don't think I always appreciated that growing up. I think I wish she would just back off a little bit. But now I'm like, man, I'm glad she didn't let me just be in my little cocoon because.
Yeah. You wouldn't be doing this if you were.
100%. No. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
You grow up, you get married.
Yeah.
So start from there.
Okay. Got married right out of college, graduated in May, got married in June. Had 2 amazing children, 3 years apart. And then somewhere in my mid-30s, just started not being happy. I don't think it was just me. It was both of us. A lot of therapy. Took a long time to make a decision, but ultimately I did decide that I didn't want to be in the marriage anymore. And in my opinion at that point, because I had such a positive example set for me, even though I never really wanted my kids to have to experience divorce, I also knew that it could be done in a way that wasn't so awful, right? Because I had that experience. So we got divorced. And then a couple of years later, I remarried. I was 40 when I remarried. And then a few months after that, my husband was killed in a car accident by a drunk driver.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Your current husband or your ex-husband?
My current husband at the time, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's what led me to the grief work that I do today, because I very quickly realized that I did not know much about grief, and what I did know really wasn't accurate or helpful. And so ultimately, when I kind of figured it out for myself, I decided I really wanted to be part of helping other women have an easier experience of that than I did.
Yeah. But y'all were only married a few months?
I know. Yeah. We were together for, a couple of years, but only married for a couple of months. We got married in April. He died in August.
Wow. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Yeah. It was really a trip, right? Because having gone through such a long, drawn out end of the first marriage and, finally finding something that felt to me like redemption, like, this is what I want. It actually does exist. Mm-hmm. And I have it, and then gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just taken away at the blink of an eye.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you still have contact with your first husband's son?
So my first husband, he.
Okay, wait a minute. Your second husband's son.
My second husband. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's still part of the fam, still comes over for holidays. And he actually joined the Marines. He was 17 when Hugo died. So he was, practically an adult. But he ended up joining the Marines, and he was gone for several years with that. But he's back now.
That's good. I'm glad you still have a relationship with him.
Yeah. It was different in that I never really got to, parent him per se, right? I mean, we didn't we didn't have that kind of relationship because it all had happened so fast.
Right.
But yet the connection is something that I think we'll just always have. And I'm also so grateful to his mother because she treated me like a second mom. I remember when we went to his graduation, his high school graduation, the year after Hugo died, she was introducing me to, it was a very small kind of non-traditional school, self-paced. And she was introducing me to everyone at the school as Lance's other mom.
Oh.
Right? You don't have to do that. She didn't have to do that. But
yeah,
that says a lot about her.
Yeah, it does. Your husband gets killed in a car wreck. And then what? You go through the grief. And then you meet someone else.
Yeah, I waited quite a while to start dating. Hugo died in 2016, and I didn't start dating until 2020. So I kind of decided, all right, I need to be happy. Not that I wasn't happy it's a spectrum, right? It's not like a binary, but not that I wasn't happy, but I really decided I don't want to jump into another relationship because I had come from the marriage and then, not a long break and then another marriage. And I was like, all right, pause. Let's figure out how to make sure we truly feel good in our own skin. And I really wanted to get to a place where I believed that a relationship was something that was a nice to have, as opposed to something I couldn't be happy without.
Right.
Yeah. And so I spent a lot of time just being me and getting to know me again and figuring out what I wanted. And then right before COVID happened, I decided, well, why not? I'll date again. Why not? And then, like the first person I met in person, I had a lot of conversations on the Bumble, but first person I actually met in person was amazing. And it just kind of so happened that we were dating and then a few weeks into that, the world shut down with COVID. And so we just kind of went into our COVID bubble and a couple years later bought a house and now live together and have a blended family. We're not married, but.
So you met on Bumble?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
David, I know that's how things are done nowadays, but David and I actually met on Plenty of Fish.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. Y'all been together, you said 4 years. Is that right?
It's 2020. So yep, a little over.
Okay. What was the relationship like with your kids and his kids?
Really? Well, so his oldest, since I've known him and really since middle school, the woman he married, has dated since middle school. And he is perpetually with her and has been since my partner and I met. So he wasn't around very much. He lived there and he slept there, but pretty much he was either at school, work, or with his now wife. Mm-hmm. So not really a lot of closeness there. No animosity, just not a lot of time together between me and him or him and my kids. His youngest, though, the three of them have a great time together and have since the first time they hung out, have always gotten along very well. So they don't all see the world in the same ways. Like there's some very big differences in that regard, but their shared love of making TikToks and doing taste test videos on YouTube and like the travel adventures that we've had, they all get along very well. So.
That's good. That helps tremendously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then my two kids also have step siblings on their dad's side. So their dad remarried actually during COVID too. And so they have a stepbrother and a stepsister on that side as well. And they all get along pretty well too.
Okay. And when you and your husband, your first husband, split up, how often did y'all have the kids? Did you do 50-50?
We did. I had them all the time except for Wednesdays and every other weekend.
Okay.
In the beginning. And then we kind of relaxed a little bit and started to do a little bit more time with him.
With your parents and step parents having such a good co-parenting relationship, we would say, what about your co-parenting relationship with your ex?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do a pretty good job. It's gotten easier as time has gone by. In the beginning, there were some very rough patches. Philosophically, though, we mostly see parenting in the same way. We have very similar values. So there's never really been any instances where I thought it should be one way and he thought it should be another, that we like went to battle, I guess. COVID was a real challenge though.
Oh yeah.
And then without airing the dirty laundry, like financially, sometimes it's complicated, right? So
Yes.
different opinions there. And so, but yeah, and it's, as the kids got a little bit older, and also in part because of COVID, they spent a lot of their time with me. Now that my youngest can drive, he's kind of going back and forth as he pleases to both houses, and that's working out pretty well. So I'm happy to be out of the phase where we have to have conversations about schedules and vacations. And I mean, we still do a little bit, but it's not nearly as much,
Well, and you can actually go through the kids without them being a pawn.
Yes, for sure. For sure. And for things like my youngest is super into Legos, and he's going to be doing some Lego shows this summer where he displays his Legos. And so this morning, my ex and I were texting about figuring out how to work out a Lego show, in a city that's a few hours away, that he can't be there for the whole time. And can I be there? And so, stuff like that, we still work out, and we still have a lot of laughs together. I mean, you can't help it. We showed up at an event a couple of weeks ago. We got married at a botanical gardens here where I live. And we both went to this really neat event that they had at the gardens with the local symphony. And it was hysterically and, I don't know, ridiculous at the same time. But I look over and I didn't know he was going to be there. And I see him, and he's like in the garden, which is right off the hill where we got married. Are you kidding me? And then the harp player that played at our wedding was in the symphony and was like playing in he texted me. He's like, "Is that our harp player?" I'm like, "I think so." Oh, what a weird world we live in.
It is.
But you got to laugh about stuff like that,
One of the things that you had said in the questionnaire was about the myths about the stages of grief. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. It's one of my pet peeves. I actually, just to give some context, I was just at a conference last week, and I was giving a presentation on grief, and I only spoke for 20 minutes, but I had a therapist come up to me afterwards. And this is someone who's been around and owns a practice of like 20 therapists and has had a lot of education. And they said to me, "I learned more about grief from your presentation than I learned in all of my training in therapy." And I say that not to make myself look good, but I say that to say that it was evidence for me that we live in a world that is grief illiterate. Yes. What we think we know about grief is, for the most part, outdated or unhelpful. And we don't have conversations, which again is why I'm always happy to talk about it. So as it relates to the myths of grief, some of the biggest ones that I see that frustrate me are, first of all, 5 stages of grief. That tends to be the only grief theory anyone ever has heard of. And while it was important in its time, it was created in 1969. And as any field of study does, grief study and grief theory has evolved over time. But it seems like the 5 stages was the one that caught on, and the one that's constantly referenced in popular culture. And I think it's important that people understand that wasn't really about grief or bereavement. That was actually about terminal illness initially, right? So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was studying hospice patients. She was studying what happens when people are trying to come to terms with a terminal diagnosis. And she noticed that anecdotally, they tended to go through a period of denial and then get angry and then bargain and then feel depressed and then ultimately come to a place of acceptance. And then she wrote a book called On Death and Dying about that work. Then later, that work and that framework was extrapolated into On Grief and Grieving. She never intended people to take her work and make it prescriptive. She did not mean to say that this is the way to do grief. She was just saying, I'm noticing some patterns, right? And it's important to talk about them. So if you are coming from the lens that says, oh, there's 5 stages and they're linear and this is how you do it, and then ultimately you come to a place of acceptance as though that's a place, then you're done with grief, you get a gold star, and you're better, right? That nobody's having that experience of grief.
Right.
All the emotions can be part of grief. I like to define grief as the natural response to a perceived loss. It's way bigger than bereavement, right? Bereavement is death, loss. So grief is, I thought it was going to go this way and it went that way. And that feels like a loss to me. So maybe I thought my marriage was going to go this way and it went that way. And that feels like a loss to me. I thought this job was going to go this way and it went that way. And that feels like a loss to me. I thought my child was going to be straight and now they're gay. And that feels like a loss to me, right? There are all kinds of things that we even, and I say that as a parent of queer kids, like it's not to say that you can't have grief over something that ultimately you're okay with, right? But all that to say, if you can't undo the loss and you're always going to have thoughts and feelings about it, which is what grief is, it doesn't come to an end.
Right.
You're always going to have grief. So the goal isn't to get to the end of it. The goal is to integrate it. The goal is to go from a place where you are just being, thrown this experience and whipped around by it to creating a relationship with the loss, to deciding who you want to be, given that the loss has happened, to decide what you want to make it mean in your life and what you want to do, given that it is part of your life. So integration is the goal because it doesn't end and acceptance isn't a place. Also, I get frustrated by the myth that time heals. And I used to say that time doesn't do anything but sit there. I've since taken a slightly more nuanced approach because I now understand, which I didn't earlier. I now understand that it does matter what you do with time, right? It does matter if you're just kind of buckling down and white knuckling your way through the intensity of the experience, just hoping that time will do the work, then often what you find is you avoided some feelings that needed to be felt. You avoided, dealing with the loss and thinking about it. And then at a certain point, you realize it's still waiting for you and it's not going away until you deal with it. So that can be counterproductive. And also, though, in terms of what's happening in our brain, if it's a significant loss to us, our brain does need time to adjust. Our brain needs time and enough exposure to the new data of the loss such that it stops predicting that what used to be should be. So what I mean by that is, when the garage door would go up, intellectually, I knew he had died, but I kept expecting it was him.
Right.
But I knew that it hadn't happened, right? You expect when you roll over, they will be there. They aren't. You know that they're not, but yet you keep expecting. And the experience of yearning, right? Those are all like your brain trying to get you to find this person who it has encoded is important to you. It's urging you to find them for your own benefit. And so those things do require time. Your brain has to have enough repeated exposures to, they're not here. They should be here. They're not here. They should be here. They're not here. Okay. Stop predicting that they should be here because they're not.
Right.
Yeah. So those are some of the most frustrating ones to me, I think.
I had actually did a Change Your Stinking Thinking challenge in our academy.
I love it.
I love it, girl. It was the most fun to do. And also just, it mesmerizes me what our brains are capable of.
Yeah.
The automatic negative thinking. Have you heard of Dr. Daniel Amen?
I don't know if I have or not.
You got to check him out.
But I use the idea of ants. Is that that person's work?
Yep.
Okay. Amazing.
Yep. He is great. He is, I don't know his real title or job position, but he works with brains. We'll just say it that way.
Okay.
He actually spoke at our church years ago when our pastor used to be a NFL player. So he did a scan on his brain and showed the damage from being an NFL player. But he also works a lot with Alzheimer's, and you got to check him out. He's really good. But during that process, we also learned that a lot of our memories are not real.
Yeah.
And that just flabbergasted me.
Yeah.
You're like, how can that not be real? And it was funny. My dad and I were sitting around recently, and my sister, and she brought up something. I'm like, that never happened. And my dad said, well, it happened, but not the way she remembers. So we all had 3 different viewpoints of the same scenario. I thought it never happened. My dad said it happened, but not in the way she's describing. And she's convinced 100% that it happened her way.
That's funny. Yeah.
So it messed with my brain.
Yeah. Well, I remember thinking as a child, well, I've been told this, that I told my parents about the time we went to the chocolate factory. And I genuinely thought that I had been to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
Really?
They were like, Krista, just a movie.
Yep.
But yeah. And I think what you're saying also is really good news for people who have experienced something that in the past caused them pain, because that's something I love about working with widows in terms of going back and deciding how to retell a story so that in the present moment, it is the story you want to tell, right? And it may be very different from how you experienced it at the time. The facts typically remain the same, but the interpretation and the emotional aspects and where you apply focus, right? Is it something that you continue to be victimized by, or can you take it back? Right. And find evidence of what it has either, helped you learn or showed you that you value, or other such ways of looking at it. But yeah, you can totally change the experience of something in the past in the present simply by looking at the way you talk about it.
Yeah, I am a big advocate on changing your perspective. A lot of stepmoms, especially, will complain about the stepkids, and I go to extremes with it. I know I do. But if the kid drew on your white leather couch and you love that white leather couch, you're livid. You're so mad. And I mean, you could be mad for months, even a year. You walk by it and you see it and it just triggers you, right? But if you stop and take a minute and say, if I found out that this kid had a terminal illness, would this matter? No, it wouldn't.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, my mom, she was a very stressed person. She had 3 girls. We were a little wild, I guess you could say. I was a daddy's girl, so that didn't help. But I still have memories of being like in 2nd grade and her getting mad at me about something. Is that memory true? To me, 100% it is, because I still feel it. I feel the hurt when I think about it. But as I've gotten older, I don't take it personally. I look at it and say, she was working, raising 3 girls. My dad worked, but he didn't have a lot to do with the house, the cooking, the cleaning, or anything to do with raising us. So she had a lot on her. So once I was able to change my perspective of that hurt feeling went away. It was more of an understanding. And that's like when my sister died. Well, actually, my mom died, and then a year and 11 months later, my sister died. And I found my sister, and that was really hard. So, and I have to drive by her house every day, twice a day, going to work and coming home, because we moved her closer to us so I could help take care of her because she was sick. And anyway, the first month or so when I would ride by that house, that's what I saw. My sister laying dead on the floor. And I just kept reliving it. And then one day I'm like, wait, I got to stop. I can't continue doing this. This is unhealthy. I will be in a great mood. Then I see that house and it just, all these feelings come about. So there's a picture of her pulling her nose up like a pig that I took of her probably 15 years before she died. And I replaced that image with the pig nose image. Then when I ride by the house, I no longer see my dead sister. I see her sitting on the front porch with her pig nose, holding her nose up, being silly. And that helped me tremendously.
Yeah. I lost a friend in my early 20s, and long story that I won't get into, but there were 4 people with her that were all killed and at the same time. Yeah, it was a really awful thing. And I would have to drive by, kind of like you did on the way to work. I would have to drive by the soccer field where that all happened. And what helped me was allowing myself to feel how I felt, right? Not not trying to talk myself out of feeling sad and frankly angry about it. But what I appreciated ultimately about the experience is that driving by regularly was a really good reminder to me to live in a way that matters. Right. Because you know how easy it is to just get in autopilot, right? Like we're just adulting and doing the things that you're supposed to do and going through the motions and checking the boxes. And you just kind of forget sometimes what's important and what you care about and who you want to be. And that was what I came to appreciate about seeing that twice a day. That field was like, all right, wake up, wake back up.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to look at it. I know we were talking about the mind. I remember when my mom died, I had to actually be the one to take her off life support. And that was really hard. It sucked. And of course, my niece was really upset and you killed my mammy. And just, so all these emotions are going through us. And then I remember the morning that I woke up after she died, and the first thing that popped in my head was, you killed your mama. How you feel?
Ugh.
Where did that come from? That did not come from a loving place inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
That came from, you can say the devil, you can just say negative thinking, however you want to phrase it. But I was like, wait a minute. I just woke up. How is this thought in my head?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times when we deal with grief, we go through the regret stage and the guilt.
Yeah.
I should have spent more time with her. I should have did this. When I was 5, I shouldn't have kicked that rock at her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All this stuff goes through your head, and it takes away from you being able to process what's happened.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting thing, right? Because I see a lot of, this is all I do all day long, right? Is work with widows. So I see a lot of guilt. I think guilt is different than regret, right? I think regret is, I wish I had. I think guilt is kind of a little bit of a different beast. I shouldn't have.
Right.
And so I think we can learn from the things that we feel regret about, right? We can use that to say, okay, what is this telling me about what I value?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that in the future, I can live more aligned with those values. But then often what I see is this attempt, and it's usually not something we're aware that we're doing, but as humans, we don't like to feel powerless.
No.
Right.
That's part of the problem with stepmamas.
Yeah. Yes. So we don't like to feel powerless, and grief, and specifically bereavement, can be very confronting in terms of showing us that in many aspects we are. Like, we want to believe we're powerful, but in many aspects we're not. Mm-hmm. But we will sometimes resort, in effort to avoid that feeling of powerlessness or looking at that, we will resort to blame, right? We will resort to guilt. So whether we're blaming someone else, like your niece did, mm-hmm. right? Or we're blaming ourselves and, maybe guilting ourselves. It can be a really easy place to get stuck in because it doesn't feel great, but it actually feels better than feeling powerless.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the way out of it is to actually check in with yourself and see if you're willing, and maybe you need to titrate a little bit into it and step gently, but am I willing to contemplate allowing myself to feel the truth of the powerlessness that is part of being human?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is yes, then it becomes easier to get out of the guilt.
Yes.
Because then it doesn't have to be anybody's fault.
Right.
The truth is just things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then depending on, I think, your faith tradition too, it can be very confronting if you were taught that good things happen to good people.
Right.
And you identify as a good person, or you see that the person that you lost, you believe was a good person, then what does mm-hmm. that mean? And does that challenge the paradigm that you've been viewing things through? And then, that's its own journey.
Right. So what would you say? Now, I do have some friends that are widows. One of them, actually, her husband died. He was 30 or 32. Mm. Very young.
Yeah.
And she got remarried, what some people would consider very quickly. Mm. And it bothers me that people judge people so much. Mm. When she told me she had met this guy, she's like, don't tell anybody because people aren't going to understand. Mm-hmm. It's not like they broke up. He's dead.
Yeah.
He's not coming back. And it's okay for her to move on in whatever time frame she's comfortable in. For some people, it may be 3 years. For some people, it might be a month. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it depends on how they died. If there was a terminal illness, then I think a lot of times you grieve the loss of that person before they actually die.
Yes, anticipatory grief is very
right. Real. And if it's an abrupt death, then it takes you a little longer, I think, to process it. But at the same time, she needed to feel alive again.
Mm-hmm.
But she was judged by a lot of people. They're like, how can you do this to him? She's not doing anything to him. He's dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know, but wow, it's ever present. It's ever present. And it's so interesting too, because it's not even one consistent judgment, right? It's a multitude of opinions. So if you date no matter when you start dating, if you decide to start dating, somebody's going to tell you you're doing it too soon, and somebody's going to tell you should have been doing it sooner.
Right.
And so
Yes.
to me, the answer is, it's like kind of like what my stepdad taught me: stay in your lane. You just cannot live your life trying to get other people's approval, because you'll make yourself crazy. And you have to live your life to get your own approval, and live your life recognizing that you are the only authority on what is best for you. And
Yes.
other people will have opinions, but we got to learn.
And you
to
are the only
dismiss.
thing you can control.
Yes. Yeah. And then people will have opinions on how you parent.
Yes.
Right? So many opinions. So I've found it easier to just acknowledge and being, I think, in an online space like you are, right? When you put yourself out there with a podcast and you give strangers the opportunity to judge you, you really start to see the value of just letting them.
Yes.
Because they will.
Yes. David actually has helped me a lot with that.
Yeah.
The first time that we received hate mail, I was all upset. And then finally, it's after so many years of doing this, they're going to think what they want to think, and I can't control that.
That's it. That's it. You just got to keep showing up, and you keep doing the work in the world that you feel called to do. And then people will have opinions, and that's okay.
Well, let's talk about kids that have lost a parent and end up in a blended family.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, and I know you've heard it a billion times, people will say, well, the stepmom has to be mom because their mom's dead. They don't have a mom. When in reality, they do have a mom.
Mm-hmm.
Just because mom passed away doesn't mean mom disappeared and never existed.
Yes.
And so a lot of times these kids are forced to treat this new partner of their parent as a parent. And it's not working. It's not fair to them because they feel like they can't remember their parent or, talk about their parent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is sad because, my hope, I bet probably people might not even find themselves if they're interested enough in educating themselves on how to create a supportive environment in a blended family. That's the reason that they're listening to your podcast. So probably they wouldn't do this in the first place. But it's so important and valuable to be able to allow children and spouses, frankly, the space to remember and carry on a relationship, right? The person died, but the relationship didn't.
Right.
The relationship is still happening, and you can either get in the way of that or you can create space for it. Mm-hmm. And if you're threatened by it, that's when you get in the way of it.
Yes.
Right. When you're solid in yourself and you realize that you are this person and they were that person, and maybe you're both in the role of mothering or fathering, but that there is no threat there, then you can help hold the space and create the container where the open discussions can happen, right? And you bring them up in conversation, and maybe you figure out, how do I carry out traditions that were meaningful? How do we bring them into the experience even though they're not living, right? Can we have pictures around? Can we?
Right.
Yeah, because to me, that like what kids need more of is they need more love and connection. And we don't have to cut them off from that experience that they can still have, even though that parent is no longer living.
Yeah, I know a lot of step parents will say, it bothers me when we're sitting around the kitchen table and the kids bring up their mom that is deceased because they feel like they're competing with a ghost. Because
but why are we even competing? What's that about?
Right.
It's not there's no winners or losers here when we're competing. I mean, maybe a better way to say that is the only reason there is a winner or a loser is because we've decided we're competing. And what if we just stop deciding that there's a competition?
Right. Yes. And the kids, a lot of times, and it's natural, when somebody dies, you forget all the bad stuff they did.
Mm-hmm.
And these people are placed on a pedestal.
Yes.
So the kids are like, my mom was the best. She cooked the best spaghetti. And stepmom just fixed spaghetti and it's like, well, this doesn't taste as good as mom's. And so stepmom gets upset and takes it personally. And it's not personal. So much of these blended family struggles are not personal.
Yes. Agreed. Yeah. And really in the broader context, I mean, we can just say that like somebody's internal experience isn't about you.
Right.
It's just not, right? It's about something going on inside of them. And it's become so much easier to deal with an experience that you are finding frustrating when you remind yourself that it really is not and never has been about you.
Yes.
Right. You might be the thing in their environment that they are having a response to in this moment, but also it's not you.
Right. And you brought up too about the spouse, the widow or the widower being able to still have those memories.
Yeah.
The friend that I mentioned earlier that her husband died at a young age, I noticed that when she posts about her anniversary with him or his birthday or even the anniversary of his death, she always adds something about her current husband.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I know why she does it. You know why she does it.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't want to make him feel bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or
And probably might be also concerned about other people judging her.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But I know her well enough to know that she wants to post, happy anniversary. We miss you. We'll always love you. Thinking of you today, whatever.
Yeah.
And she don't want to mention the new husband, but she feels obligated to for whatever reason. And people like me that know her so well read it and was like, man, I hate you feel that way. I hate that you feel you have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Which again, who knows what's going on in her dynamic, but if we can be the example of that, if we're the one who didn't experience the loss and we're married to someone who did or dating someone who did, then I think we can be an active, contributor to creating a space where it is okay, where we ask them questions, we let them talk, let the photos be around. It's not a threat. They didn't ask for that person to die. It's not like divorce, right?
Right.
And not to say that in all sides of divorce, you necessarily wanted the marriage to end either, right? Sometimes you didn't. Sometimes you very much wanted it to keep going. But for sure in death, you didn't.
Right.
Unless maybe there are some extenuating circumstances, in which case those aren't my clients typically that wanted their person to die. But,
So haven't dealt with my ex yet.
Yeah. That's funny. I'll let you know if that happens. But just it's I like to think of it like this too. You know how when you have, I don't know, do you have one kid? Do you have more than one kid?
One. I have one and then 4 stepsons.
Okay. So when I had my biological second child, I remember thinking like, how can I love them more? Like how, is there enough space for this? But that's not really something that when you have more than one kid, you ever really think is a problem, because you realize that the love that you have for them, biological or step, really is not a finite resource. It's an infinite thing. And it's not a competition from child to child in your heart. You don't see it that way.
No.
And can we extend that same philosophy to a spouse's former spouse?
Right.
Right? Like it's not a competition and there's no limit to love. So how about we just let them have the love that they had and don't see it as something threatening, and know that I think it's so common where we don't want to bring things up because we're worried that, we'll remind people of something, we'll make them sad, and we think that emotions are problems. So, we don't want to make people sad, and we don't know how to feel good if they don't feel good. So we just keep it light, or we avoid and, treat people like they're fragile.
Yeah, because we don't know what to say.
Yeah, right. And so we say nothing. And so, but unfortunately, then what that leads to is less connection. Because chances are good that the person who's experienced the loss, even if it was years ago, it's still more prevalent in their mind than you might think. And it's so much more connecting and validating when someone asks you about it or shares a memory or brings them up in conversation. And it doesn't hurt. It's actually, I think, more hurtful to feel like you're alone in it.
Yes.
than it is to share the emotional experience, even if you wouldn't articulate it as positive,
Right.
to share it with another human who's interested in connecting with what is authentic for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish we were less worried about upsetting other people. And I wish we were a little more brave and a little more willing to say, hey, I've been thinking about so-and-so, or I remember that time when, and share a story, or there's so much potential for connection there.
For me, I enjoy talking about my mom and my sister.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps them alive to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For me, when you were talking about time, it doesn't matter when it is. Today still feels like yesterday that my mom died. But at the same time, it feels like 100 years since
grief time. It's weird. It's a thing though, because it's almost universal with everyone that I talk to, where it's just like, yes, it was forever ago and also simultaneously yesterday.
Yeah.
And then I also think people are not anticipating, and I want to give name to it because I think it's so helpful, secondary losses, right? So the primary loss would be like the loss of your mom. Like that's the primary loss. But then there's all these other secondary losses that you're going to continue to experience for the rest of your life that happened because of your mom's loss, right? So it's when Jackson maybe gets married and your mom's not there, right?
Or graduation.
Or graduates from high school and your mom's not there. It's not new in the sense that she died a while ago, but also it is in and of itself its own loss. And I think if we better understood and anticipated secondary losses, then when we experienced them, we would be gentler with ourselves.
Yes, I 100% agree. A lot of it is just learning about this stuff and knowing, hey, what I'm feeling is normal.
Yes.
Again, and we wish you well.
Thank you. Same.
One of the things that Krista and I talked about was the competition that stepmoms feel when they marry a widower. Or vice versa. It's the competition with the ghost.
Yeah, that's kind of hard.
Yeah. And she talks about not making it a competition.
Yeah. Especially when it's not like a bad breakup or something. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, even if it is, when somebody dies, they're a saint.
Yeah, they often are. It's like you never see somebody get on TV and go, you know what? He was a piece of crap. It's always, they were the pillar of the community.
Yes. The best person you'd ever meet.
Yeah. They do everything for you. It's like, is this the same person we know?
Yep.
You're right. What is it? Don't speak ill of the dead.
Yeah. Don't speak ill of the dead. But, okay. So she was married, got divorced, got remarried, had only been married a few months when her husband was killed in a drunk driving accident.
Oh, man. Ugh.
Yep. She does have a partner now.
That'd have to be tough. That would be tough on the new partner for sure.
So if y'all enjoyed the podcast and want to hear more from Krista St-Germain, check her out on her Widowed Mom podcast. And don't forget, leave us a review on our podcast. It'll help others find us.
That's right. And we appreciate it too. More than you know.
We do. And if we would know who you were, we would send you a Cersei.
A Cersei?
Yeah, a prize.
Oh.
I knew a word you didn't.
Apparently.
Yeah,
I have
a
heard
prize.
the word, but I didn't know that was what it was.
Give you a little prize.
In my world, Cersei is an acronym for something cybersecurity related. That's why when you said that, I was like, what?
Yep. Nope. All right, y'all.
All right, folks, that is our show for today. And remember now, if you are in the Denver, Colorado, or you're in the Scottsdale, Arizona area, and you would like to plan some type of meetup with us, let us know. Send an email to contact@nachokids.com, and we'll see if we can get something planned. There you go.
Yeah, I think the Arizona one is in September, and the Colorado one, I believe, is the first part of December.
Other way around.
You think? I don't think so.
It is.
Okay.
All right, folks. Remember, life is good
when you nacho.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nacho Kids Podcast. Find us online at nachokids.com. Until next time, remember, life is good when you nacho.